to our Mishna Berurah class. We are continuing the Mishna Berurah in Orach Chaim 153. We are in the middle of the laws of discussing how to build a basic Knesset, how to build a shul, or as we also saw how to build your own personal base medrash. So we are going to talk about now the money collection for doing this process, as we talked about in the previous few halachos at the beginning of here in Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and Daled in 1, 2, 3, 4. We were looking at the possibility of using money for different aspects of construction, and we learned how you can only use money to go from, if you sell a holy item, to go up in holiness, but not to take a step down. So you can exchange it for more holy things. So we're going to continue in that discussion, and we saw that there was a question about could you go like same level. So we talked about they should have in mind if you want to exchange it, like you buy Sifrei Nach and you want to replace some of those, like your Megillah is not so great, you want to buy a new Megillah. With that, you want to sell the old Megillah and buy a new Megillah. Okay, things like that. Or Sefer Torah, you can't just go ahead and buy the same type of thing. You can only go up in it. So let's talk about if you collected money. You collected money, and you told people you're using this money to build another shul, okay, or a base medrash, place to learn. Or you're going to use that money to build another, it says here, teva, which is what we call now the bima, the table upon which you read the Sefer Torah. Or you're going to buy more of the surrounding fabrics that go around the Sefer Torah. Or you collect the money to actually buy another Sefer Torah. But now, as with all good things, you want to change your mind, and you want to use that money for something else. So what we are basically extending from the previous halacha into this one is you may not go from a higher, you can't go from a higher to a lower. You only go from a lower holiness level to a higher. Okay. So if you go ahead and use that money for those things that you originally collected the money for, then the whatever money is left over, you may then go ahead and use that money for even things that are on a lower level. If you collect the money and you make a condition on the money saying, I want to do with this money whatever I want to do with it, and especially with whatever's left over from the money. So even if you went ahead and bought things and sold things and went ahead and bought them and sold them, and the holiness level is, not all equivalent, but you go ahead and want to buy other things with that money, that's okay to go down in holiness levels, whatever's left over. But if you didn't make this condition when you collected the money, and you only sell it and then want to try to make a condition on it, then you cannot use that money for a lower level down. Okay, so therefore you should be careful to when you collect the money, you also say, I also want this money to go for other things that are necessary in the shul, even if that they're a level that's a little bit lower holiness-wise. So remember, we go down from, buying the bima, the Sefer Torah, the other farm, so on and so forth. The Ramah says, if you purchased with money by which you were going to buy the wood and the stones, then meaning to build the walls of the base medrash or the base Knesset, so the holiness goes into that money, and then goes into those same rocks and stones. Okay, so you have already designated them for a holy purpose, and that holiness transfers to the purchase object. So if you went to Home Depot and you bought all of the lumber for your framing of the shul, you now have holy lumber that you cannot do anything else with. You may not change it, says the Ramah. It can only be used for the same higher level of holiness. Okay, and if you go ahead and bring those rocks and stones for the purpose of building the basic Knesset, if they come to the collector himself, the Gabbai, right, then you may not change them to anything else unless you're going to use them for something more sacred. So let's say you're going to use the wood to build the Aron, right, where you're going to house them. Then you're like, oh, well, we really need that to extend the sanctuary. So you could build onto the basic Knesset itself. That would be fine, but not the other way around. Okay, and definitely you can't change your mind, says the Ramah. Now, Mr. Berurah explains. So we said the last thing was that we put Sefer Torah at the end. So the Sefer Torah is at the end of the whole thing about you can't change it to the Bima, you can't change it to other books, you can't change it to other uses, or a Sefer Torah. So the Mishnah says, so when we end with this word Sefer Torah, we can't change it. It's going on the you can't change it statement of it. And we're trying to teach us that you could go ahead and use other things that will take care of the students who are learning, which we'll learn in the next Sif, Sif Vav. So that's why it was at the end slightly, because we'll see that there are certain things, it's not 100%, it's like 90% you can't use for other things. And we see you can't change it to use something else. So the Mishnah says over here, if the collectors themselves want to lend the money, and then they're going to put other money in its place, the Magen Avraham says you can't do that, because the people who gave the money expected that money to go to a specific purpose. And that money needs to go directly to the building the shul or buying the covers or whatever it is. However, the Taz permits it. However, it can only be done through the people who are known as the Shiva Tovei Ha'ir, the 7 leaders of the community. Okay? And they have to do it in front of the entire community. And then, according to everybody, that would be okay. And we'll learn about that in Sif Zion. Oh, I'm sorry. The Taz has permitted without this whole statement, but we'll see later on in Halacha 7 that you could permit the money having it in front of the whole congregation and the whole city to permit the money. But he seems to say that if you want to just lend the money out for other purposes, you can exchange one money for another set of money. Okay, talking about using the money for whatever purpose you'd like. So even if it's something that has Kedusha on it, but you have extra money for it and it's going for the needs of the community, that's okay. And the reason why is because people in the community, when they collected the money, had in mind to for sure, even if you don't say it explicitly, to use that money for purposes that would be for the betterment of the city and for a permitted purpose. And that's why you can go ahead and use that. Okay, and now let me say over here, now what about when you buy the building materials? So it sounds like you're stuck with that. So the Gra and the Eliyahu Rabbah don't agree with the Ramah on this. So their statement is that let me make sure I'm reading the right thing over here. So their statement is that the money transfers the holiness directly to the stuff that you buy, and then you can't go ahead and try to exchange it for other things. Okay, so when the Shulchan Aruch says that you're going to go ahead and exchange it for other stuff, you can't go ahead and try to use the remainder after you've already purchased something. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says that, and they disagree and say no, that you can't go ahead and try to exchange the money for another level of kedusha. Okay, you can't lower it down. So once you buy it for that purpose, it stays for that purpose. If you don't make any condition on the money, we said at the end that it has to continue at the same level. The reason why is because the holiness of the money goes into the next object that you're purchasing, and you can't then say, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about that." Okay, so and then we say about the holiness applying to the money as well, and so the Magen Avraham explains over here that you cannot do other purposes with it, like lending it out or giving it to other money. So it has to be used, even though it's finished its first job, it has to stay for purposes of the shul. Okay, and then we say you also can't exchange the money to do something else when the Ramah is saying that you're already using it to buy the building materials. So the Mishnah explains that we're going to learn later on that if you have already intended to use the money to make the shul nicer, and you want to do the next thing for building the shul, so this all applies for when you're expending and working on a shul that's been already used for the purposes of prayer. You've already held davening in there. But if you haven't held davening in there, then you can go ahead and change the purposes of these things. So when we say that when you're buying these building materials, we're talking about a shul that's already had prayer in it. But when you're saying we're going to eventually daven there, then you haven't. It's not transferring a sanctity to it yet because you haven't actually held a prayer service in it. And it's not just a shul when you're just attempting to turn it into a shul. It has to already be a shul. So therefore, when you go ahead and collect the money, and you say you're going to use it for building another synagogue, and you're going to use money for it that was collected, if that money was collected just as regular taxes, okay, and then you say to people, okay, well, we're going to try to build a new shul. Everyone bring rocks and stones and wood for the building purposes, and they build a shul with that. Okay, so that's one thing, but if you went ahead and you collected the money for that purpose, then people in the community could say, well, we don't want it to use for any other civil purpose. We only want it to do for the synagogue. It has less to do with the holiness of the synagogue. It has more to do with the fact that you're not allowed to change it for another purpose because you've already told them that you're doing it. So it depends on how you're collecting the money. So if you just were collecting money without being specific about it versus telling them you're collecting to build the shul. And if you were collecting to build a shul, then again, not because you've ever davened in the shul, but because you already told them that's what it's going for, and they already made a condition on the money that this money is going to go to the shul. And that's what the Mechaber and the Ramah, that's what they're talking about. And the reason why there is a disagreement about changing it is because we've already collected it. Then the conditions that you set on it already apply. So it's like you made a contract. It has less to do with the sanctity of it. So you have a contract to build the shul. The Magen Avraham says, however, that the money was collected, and you say it's for the purposes of a shul, then what you're actually doing is not because you put a condition on it, because it's embarrassing to take the money you've raised and then lower the kedusha on it. So he says it's not really a contract on that. Technically, you could. It would be embarrassing to come back and say, oh yeah, the money we collected, we're not really going to build a shul with it. We're going to build a racetrack. Okay. So, and according to Magen Avraham, the Mishnah further explains. So if you're not, when we talk about people have donated wood and stone for the purposes of building, someone didn't come to them to collect it from them. Rather, because that would make it no less than collecting any kind of money. This is where people have walked up to a specific place and donated this money for the purpose of building the shul. However, if they were just donating stuff in general and they didn't make any condition on it, the guy was just like, oh, I have lots of this stuff, we can use it to build a shul, that's fine. Okay, so there's a lot to be said on this, but we're not going to look into it too much. And we say as soon as you give it to the gabbai, the person collecting, it's prohibited. But if you wanted to, if it's only when you're asking the gabbai to change his mind, would there be any problems? But if you have the whole community there and the leaders of the congregation, you could change your mind, which we'll learn about in a second. And the reason why is because it's permitted to go ahead and change them to something else, which means you could go ahead and use them for loans or to give them to people to use for other purposes. And especially if you just give money to the shul and don't tell them what to do with it, it could be used for any type of other permitted purpose as well. Okay. Once I say I'm going to do that with it, however, then I would be, if I said I'm giving you the money to build the shul, I can't have it changed because there's been a vow, and once the vow is given, that stays forever. Okay, that was halacha 5. Let's look at halacha 6. Okay, halacha 6. One may sell a synagogue and all other types of holy things, and even a sefer Torah, in order to take care of the students who are learning, okay, or to raise money to marry off orphans. Okay, so why is that? So Mishna explains is that we're not allowed to sell Sefer Torah except to learn Torah. Okay, so that would be the same level of holiness, which is to say that learning Torah is, even if you're selling a Sefer Torah, it would be permitted. And that's true, so people who don't pay enough money to keep these people going, to keep them learning, it's kind of an embarrassment. And that's why it's allowed to do it. People hear, where's the Sefer Torah? Oh, we sold it because the people sitting and learning couldn't afford to learn if we didn't sell it. And so it's kind of embarrassing that the community themselves wouldn't take care of the people learning there. And also we say it's marry off orphans, okay? And that's not only boys, but also girls. You can sell the Sefer Torah to raise money for getting them married. And even though a woman is not commanded for the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying, nonetheless, there's a rabbinic commandment to contribute to populating the world. And that even applies by women. And this also explains why you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah to redeem somebody who's been captured. Okay, and the Magen Avraham says this, and he quotes also, and the Eli Rabbah quotes this in the name of other poskim as well. And if we look at Siman Yud Gimel 13 later on, that you're not even allowed to really sell a shul for that purpose, to redeem somebody who's been captured, unless you can't get the money from other people. Only that it's like a last resort thing. Okay, and so then as a last resort, you could go ahead and do it. But if they only have the one shul, they really shouldn't sell the shul to try to rescue them. And so too with the Sefer Torah. However, in the next Sif, number 7, there's a couple of things that need to be said in advance to really understand this. Okay? So when we say about selling a shul, what we're talking about is this is a synagogue in a small town, and it was built specifically just to be a place of prayer. And so therefore, if most people get together and it's a small enough group where they could all get together and agree to sell it, okay, or to not, at the very least, not change it from being a synagogue. And that's why when you want to try to sell it, the money stays at their holiness level. And you have to use it only for things that go above that. And even when it's being sold through the leaders of the community, that could be done when they go ahead and have everyone agree that they're going to use the money for other important things. So, and we're going to see that in a second. But if it's a shul that's in a large city, so you can assume that they knew they were going to move around the city, and there's going to be other purposes there, and people were intending the money to be used for other things. So even in that case, that it was meant to be used for a number of people. And so therefore, even when they all agree afterwards to sell it by the agreement of the people who run the city, you can't do that. And that's why we're going to explain now the difference between Halacha 6 and Halacha 7. So Halacha 7 says the following. So when we say that you're able to sell a shul, different than what we just said, sounds like you could sell it. Okay, so that can only be done in these smaller towns where people aren't coming from lots of places. Okay, and so the large shul gathers a whole bunch of Jews from several different small towns, and this is their only place where they can gather to pray. And even if they went ahead and gathered money around from people not living in the city, the shul still has to take that central place. Okay, and so therefore, if you wanted to sell it, you could, but you have to use it for another shul. Meaning, this is a really long halacha. Okay, so if it was only made for the people who live out in these spread out villages, okay, they are stuck with having to keep the money used for building something on that same level, so either another base of Knesset, another base of Medrash. That's what they have to do with it. So it's really important that we see how these laws all interact with each other. Are not allowed to go ahead and use it for something else, and this, even if the people in the city did it, and that's only when the people in the city do it without the consent of the people who are in charge of the overall care. So there could be like different tiers of care for the city. So on a lower level, people where the synagogue is in their domain, they may not have been the ones who built it, and so therefore the money isn't really theirs. And so too, even if the highest level of the Shevet Hayir, who are the highest level of political power in the area, even if they want to sell it and use the money for something else, if they don't have the entire city there present when they're making this decision, that's also not good. However, if that group wants to sell it and they do a public hearing on the whole matter, that's when they can go ahead and use the money for other purposes. Would not be considered a misappropriation from holy stuff, like Me'ilav Hektish, basically is what we would say that. Now, if the people who are running the city say, listen, when we sell this, everything that we're going to do, they announce it, even if there's one person that objects, or one person that takes a stand against it, they could go ahead and say, listen, you have agreed since we made this statement publicly. Okay. So again, it gets a little bit more complicated now. We're going to look at the Ramah. So Ramah adds a few more conditions. Now, if a single person went ahead and donated the money to build a shul, okay, and he gives it to the congregation, it's considered now belonging to the public. However, if he leaves himself some interest in the property, okay, the Ramah actually has some strength in there. So then he can't sell it, right? But as long as he leaves some interest in it, unless the whole community says nope, it has to be him and them, and everyone has to agree, or his inheritors. So that's how you could end the sale right there. And this is only if there is another shul, but if it's only the one single shul in the whole place, you cannot sell it, because even to take it down, we learned previously, is prohibited until you build another one. Okay, so we learned that already. So this is if you have an extra shul only. And then we finish off by saying every single thing that is imbued with holiness that is sold, you can change it without announcing it. Okay, and that meaning that it's only a shul that requires a special announcement and the hearing and everything like that, but not everything else. And there's also no problem of overcharging when you're selling holy things. However, the rule of not changing it from a higher holiness to a lower holiness, that you can't do without having this announcement. Okay, so we said the privilege was prohibited. Now, Les Mishnah is going to explain. So we said that there's a big difference between having a place that's one shul or only two shuls versus a big city where there's lots of shuls. So the Mishnah explains that after looking at the halacha, the later commentators made the following comments on it. If there's not a lot of people who are coming to visit this shul, then that's what we're talking about as a small town. Okay, so even though there are a lot of people around who pass by and they can stop in this place to come daven, they just don't. Okay, they just don't come there very often. They just pass it by, and they only stop there once in a while. Okay, and that's considered a synagogue of a small town. However, when you have lots of people using it on a regular basis and they come to pray fairly frequently, okay, and especially if it's like near the marketplace where, I could imagine like having a synagogue downtown because everyone's downtown and they all work there and they're going to have mincha ma'ariv there. So that is considered a city synagogue, okay? And it's even if the city's kind of small, but people use it a lot. Or it's a place where there is a really unbelievable rabbi there, and people come to visit him. Okay, so they come to listen to him and the Torah that he's teaching. So that is a big city synagogue, and in such a case, everyone seems to agree that you built it. Okay, and that's hard to get rid of something like that. They also say that a shul that's in a large town, if it was only made for a few people, okay, so certain craftsmen have their own special shul, and so too if there's only some people who build it for their little cul-de-sac, okay, which is a little further from the main synagogue, and then make a little synagogue over there. So this is considered a basic knesset of kfarim, all right, a little synagogue for just a few people, even if it's in a big town, because it was built on this condition that people want to build it, and if they no longer wish to use it, that's fine, because the rest of the community doesn't actually invest in it either. So that is and that's the rule on that. Okay, and let's see over here. Next one is, so if they build it, okay, with a single person. So because so another person gives them the money. The reason why is when another person gives them the money, they intend that they're going to have a say in what's going on, even though that's not. They may not be coming there that often. So even if they don't agree, but if you have everybody agreeing to go ahead and sell it, then you can go ahead and sell it. Okay. When else could you do it? So, and you're also not allowed to change the money, but we just talked about when you are and are not allowed to sell it, such as if you're going from the same level of Kedusha and so on. And so too, the people who are in charge of this, the people who are the Sheva Tovei Ha'ir, who are going to be in charge of this. So there's a discussion over here of who these people are. So the Mishna brings down a tshuva from the Rashba. He quotes an even older source. The tshuva from the Rashba. It's also brought down in the tshuvas of the Rashdam. He says that these are not the 7 people that are chosen because of their knowledge or because of their wealth or the honor. These are people who were chosen by the community, maybe elected is what they mean, as people who are meant to look after in the city's trust. Okay, so it's not their money; it's just the interests that they're looking out for. Okay, and they are really trustees for the whole thing. The word we use here is apotropos, which would mean a trustee. And furthermore, if they were accepted, however they were accepted, so why do we need 7? And the reason why is because if you are getting a bunch of people to do on a matter, and there's a number of things that they have to choose what to do, and especially if they have to sell something that they need to get rid of. Okay. So even one person can go ahead and make a reason why that wouldn't go forward. However, 7 gives them enough to say that when they finally all agree, that's good. Okay. So, and this is specifically when your community has appointed people who are going to take charge of looking after everything around them. That's the main point of this. Okay, so we'll come back and look at more of this insight next time. This is getting a little bit long and detailed. I'll come explain it more in detail, but we'll stop here and pick up next time over here in halacha Zion and discuss it in more detail for next time. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you again.